Okay. People shift around. Yeah, you bet. Okay, well, thank you guys so much for coming. I wanted to speak a little bit about youth interns. And I guess, first of all, have any of you ever hired a youth intern?
My kids.
Okay, kids count. Totally. Well, I'll tell you, it goes something like this. You're standing on your back porch and you hear something that sounds like, and then silence. And then a burst of laughing, and you think, oh no. And so that pretty much sums up my experience the second year that I had youth interns. And my first intern from summer 1 was training my intern from summer 2 how to drive our manual mini truck that you shift with your left hand. So anyway, they didn't run anything over, but it was one of many instances where I either had to close my eyes and pretend it wasn't happening or just join in there laughing. So I want to talk a little bit about SARE. If you are not familiar, I guess let me back up. Is anybody not familiar with SARE? Okay, so SARE is this group called Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education, and they do offer multiple grant programs. And I think I have 2 favorite things about SARE. One, they want to reduce the risk of farmers to try something new. And so they will award grants basically to hold the financial risk or burden of trying to move sustainable agriculture forward. And so it's a great opportunity to try crazy new ideas that you're like, well, I don't have the money to try that on my own, but maybe it would be a great opportunity. Or I have this crazy idea and I have a group of people who think that we can all collect rainwater in this way. Would it work? So that's the first thing. The second thing is that everything you do through SARE is open source. So that means anybody who receives a SARE grant has to submit their report online, and it's open to anybody to come see it later. So you can go read this long title. You can search that on the North Central SARE website and read my full report. You can read the full report of the water collection system and any projects ever that's been done. So I love those 2 things about SARE. Okay, so my primary project was about a youth educator grant. And ultimately, I wanted to develop a program to help students in my area see farming as maybe a potential career choice, especially on a small scale. So I come from a very heavily row crop, a large ranching area. You're not a real farmer unless you farm that. And that's something I've had to overcome too. That's where I came from as a background. And so trying to learn, is this an option? So there were 3 primary elements that were part of our program. First of all, community needs. What does your community need? Can you identify a market and meet that need? Now that one for my interns was pretty well developed because when they came to my farm, I raised meat goats and dairy goats, primarily dairy goats for direct consumer sales. And so that market was kind of already identified. The second thing, maintaining a farm system. So what does it take to have a profitable farm? How do you operate a budget? What is value-added production? How do you care for livestock, for products and marketing? And then how do you treasure your family? So if you live on your farm, how do you have some semblance of a work-life balance? And can you farm with a family? And maybe your family not despise it by the end. Okay, so here were the logistics of the program. The grant was to cover 2 interns that were expected to be hired for 1 season. So that was going to be 8 months long at 270 hours each. They were going to be paid $10.50 an hour. This project was done in 2023 to 2024. And they were responsible for keeping track of their hours and submitting monthly invoices to me. That was all on them. When it came time to recruit interns, I asked for applications. We interacted through schools, through FFA programs, through 4-H programs, and then just like job boards, social media, anywhere that we could get anybody to come through for that. And then the students had to submit an application. If their application was accepted, they were invited to the farm for an interview. So that way they knew what might be expected of them. I would get to know them a little bit. And then ultimately, if we decided to offer them a position, we sent them an internship requirements form with their offer. Now, I will say with that, what ended up actually happening, we were supposed to have 2 interns, and I had found 2 that seemed like a really good fit, and I will say 1 didn't show at all for like the first week. Total ghosts, wouldn't return phone calls, anything like that. So sometimes your project doesn't look like you think it's going to look, and so I ended up with 1 my first summer when I thought I was going to have 2. Okay. Pre-test and post-test. Part of this was required as part of the grant program, but the reality is I didn't know what my students knew or not. I didn't require any kind of ag background. They just needed to be honest and have a willingness to learn. We can work with that. And so part of the pre-test and post-test was, do you know anything about a goat? Have you ever heard about rotational grazing? Do you have any semblance of an idea of what value-added production is? And so that would kind of help me understand them and them understand me. Oops, sorry. Okay. Other parts of the program included field trips. And the whole goal of this was to create a valuable experience for our interns. So this meant far beyond our farm. Sure, they got experience there, but then what other things could we incorporate? So some things that we did, I'm part of the Miami County agritourism circuit. So I would send them, we kicked off each summer with kind of a scavenger hunt. They could pick 3 farms off of the list. They had to go and fill out an evaluation form of things that they observed at each of those farms that connected back to our primary focuses. So that was their first day, was to go see what was out there and then see what, that helped me also see what strikes their interest. What 3 farms did they choose and why did they choose those? We connected, since we're a goat-centered operation, we connected with a large commercial meat operation in central Kansas. And so took them to work 300 meat goats for a day. And depending on the intern, that was maybe a completely new experience. Or there was a poultry farm that we connected with. So that way, at 9 o'clock at night, we'll go and load 600 birds and see what that looks like, or connect with the local produce farm. So trying to give them a robust experience beyond what we could offer, just for them to see. These are a lot of what small farm operations are, minus the commercial herd, to see if that would be a viable career or interest to them. They had to do an on-farm project. I'll talk about that a little later. And then they had to present a final presentation. And the way our agritourism group works is we have a spring tour and then a fall farm tour. And so my students knew from the very beginning that they would be required to submit a budget and develop a project and present that at that event. Now, they didn't have to know what it was at the beginning, but that came later. Okay, so the first year, I'll call her B. First year was full of learning curves, and I'm not sure who learned more. I'm not sure if B learned more or if I learned more. She came from a background with no agricultural experience, but she was very interested in it. She had started to take steps of self-education by joining FFA at school. She was on the dairy judging team, which ended up being a very good fit for a dairy goat-centered farm. But other than that, she had no idea. And so the way we just started is we worked together. We worked together a lot. So I could just show her what I did. How do you handle yourself around livestock? How do you handle yourself around electric fence? Just building trust, me getting to trust her, her trusting me. And then there are things that you find that you think are common sense that are not common sense to everybody else. So I'll use this example. As we were rotating electric fence, I can't tell you how many times I would come back and find my electric fence stuck to a T-post. Just, and I thought, why are my goats out? Well, it's because all of the electricity has been grounded out. And that was a lesson that we went over day after day after day. It just takes a while. She didn't know. She just didn't know. And then you would find things like, well, I just said that they were B's way of doing things. Sometimes I would go and find fence connected in ways that I thought, that's very interesting. Not the way I would do it, but it's done. And that was okay too. So we just found things like that and laughed about it. Or we were working at putting a rotational fence around a pond. And my 2-year-old turned on the electric fencer while I was sticking fence in the pond. And, we laughed about stuff like that. Because what else are you going to do? Part of it. We ate lunch together daily. And part of the whole deal was to invest in a student. And so it helped me get to know her on a personal level. Part of the deal was for her to get to be kind of part of our family. So she got involved with my little kids. They adored her. And then we also would change that into watching a webinar every day. And for her, I made a list of webinars from reputable places that I thought, I'm going to see what she picks. What strikes her fancy, things that were somehow related to our farm, but then also trying to cater to her interests and grow her. Sometimes they were related to marketing. Sometimes they were related to goat herd health. Sometimes they were related to gardening or poultry. I didn't know what she would be interested in. And so I started to notice themes, and she was building her knowledge base with that, and then we would discuss it afterwards. Over time, as the heat of summer came on, she was not accustomed to being outside all day. So taking kind of just recognition of that and shifting our hours for weather. So if it was going to be really, really hot, most of the time we would start at 7 and end about 1. If it was going to be really hot, we might start as early as 5 and break at 11. And that seemed to work out. What I did not do with her is I didn't involve her in my morning chores. So anytime she would start, I would have made sure that all of my milking chores were done beforehand. Then we would start with her. And at the beginning, it was a lot of, we're working together. So it wasn't, she could go work on something else while I did chores. That was all put together. Okay, year 2, I got a lot smarter. We hired intern E, and I was definitely more organized day to day. So instead of just kind of saying, well, these things need done, we had a schedule. And I found this kind of consistency helped our interns immensely. So for example, on Mondays and Tuesdays, we would add all the paddocks for the week. On Wednesdays, we would work on special projects. On Thursdays, we would focus on direct-to-consumer marketing or value-added production. And then on Fridays, a lot of times we'd take our field trips or work on something else that was interesting to the student. And that helped tremendously. We also streamlined our hours. So with the first student, it was kind of like, are you available this week? We'll figure that out. By the second year, that was not the case. I said, these are the days you're working. If your family is taking a trip, it's summer, you're a high schooler, I expect that, we communicated those things clearly, but some of those things were just set in stone. So that way they have that expectation. And with most of our hours being in the morning, then that wasn't an unfair expectation. They could still have a lot of their social life, and they knew that when they hired on. So for the second year, I just repeated the same hiring process I used the first year. Re-invited applicants that I did not accept the first year to reapply, and then also had some others that joined in on that year. And then the other thing I did that helped me and helped them was I streamlined, with my hours, I included them in the AM milking. I was concerned about that because I handle raw dairy, and inviting other people into that is a really big deal. So I spent a huge portion of time at the beginning of that summer investing in safety training. So we worked through the Raw Milk Institute. I paid them to watch training videos at home on their own time, and then talked to them afterwards to make sure that they really did. And that was well worth it. Then they were part of that cycle. They felt then this is the cycle of a dairy, not just, I come work on my projects and go home. So that was really important. And in terms of quality of life for me and for the intern, I think that really made a big difference. So, fourthly, I used B. She had a few hours left after her first year. Used her to train intern E as much as I could. And that's how we got to the mini truck situation. We ended up in a lot of situations with that. But I will say overall good. They bonded. It solidified the education that B had received the year before by giving her the confidence and empowerment to teach the next one. And I did have to go back and say, okay, let's tweak this a little bit. Maybe, again, how do you handle electric fence and metal? And I will say there were some differences between the two. E had a lot more animal savviness, just innate. She was really good with livestock. Her background was not heavily ag-based, but she had some horses. She had some kind of experience, but didn't really know anything about sustainable agriculture and definitely nothing about goats. But you could tell she just knew how to handle herself around livestock. The other side to that, though, was she was not as detail oriented. So when it came to, say, milk safety, I had to really, really work with her to make sure that I could trust her to safely handle milk. So some of those things, I would just sort of cater to each student what was a better fit for them. And I wouldn't want anybody to do that for me. If there are things I'm better at than others, and I sure want you to work with me on what I'm good at and train me on the things I'm not. And then that second summer, B only had a few more hours to complete. She worked with us, and then actually some of our field trips from the previous year landed her other farm jobs in the county, which was really, really cool. And then E worked a lot more hours. So in this one, so this was one of our field trips that we took them to work goats, and even the farmers that we worked with said she has a knack, and I said, I know, I agree, she really, really does. And then sometimes I would throw them into projects and not give them an answer. So we had some fencing gates that were really poorly made. They showed up. I was super not impressed. And I just said, hey, I'd like you guys to fix these. Here are some tools. And I just kind of stepped back to see what would happen. And I think that's it. We need chances to explore and try things. And over and over and over again, I told them it's okay to try new things here. It's okay to have ideas, and it's okay to fail. And we're not going to grow if we don't have a chance to do that. So they came up with some clever solutions and some things that worked that we still use. The other thing I want to point out is I had this baby carrier in the back. I had an infant that year. So again, inviting them into the rhythms of what does farm life look like? And sometimes it doesn't look like what you think it's going to look like. And so we did a lot of work with a baby carrier around, or maybe taking breaks to nurse an infant or that kind of thing. And they got it. Like they got it. The last thing I want to say about this year is they also navigated completely unexpected things with us. We had a lightning strike. We went out to do morning chores one morning, and I found like 25% of my herd had died overnight. I was stunned. And so were they. How do you handle that? And so then I'm kind of working through like, okay, what pictures do I need for documentation for blah, blah, blah. And also, how am I going to explain to my 5-year-old that their favorite goat just died? And also, how am I going to explain to these interns what just happened? And the thing is, I didn't explain any of it. We just kind of took it in, but we did it together. And so that's farm life. And I was really thankful that they had that experience to see with me, to grow with me. And now it's kind of like one of those things of, hey, you remember that day that we went out and we're totally surprised? Yeah, that happens. All right. So this is my favorite part, maybe. Success stories of the whole thing. They learned something. Their post-tests were much more complete. They knew how to manage herd health. They knew what value-added products were. They knew how to rotationally graze. And part of the rotational grazing project is each of them, in their own summers, I've given them liberty. I said, you have 30 goats. You have this area. Write out a grazing plan for me. How are you going to do it? This is after they had worked with me, so they weren't coming in totally unaware. And then they had to own it. And then they had to see what happens if I let them stay on too long. What if I did that wrong? Well, it's okay to fail. I mean, I wasn't going to let them fail to seriously damage anything, but when you own that, when you have that sense of ownership, you're a lot more willing to get in there and get after it and figure out what you're going to do. So they learned that. They learned raw dairy management. They learned business skills. They had to budget for their project. They worked with us in direct-to-consumer sales once a week through our farm shop. The student who was on the dairy FFA team, she helped in some of the cheese making processes, and I learned from her in the same way that she learned from me, so that was neat. They learned people skills. How do you interact with customers? How do you present your information at farm tour to people who are coming in and saying, well, what's this? And I didn't stand in the way. That was their job. And then they built confidence of, hey, I figured out how to milk this goat that won't let me. Or I figured out how to hook up electric fence and not ground it every time. I learned how to drive a mini truck that shifts on the wrong side. And then the thing is, I learned too. I learned clear structure and predictable schedules makes a big difference when you hire an intern. So for example, we didn't work on Sundays. That was an important thing that I told them up front, except for our couple farm tour weekends. We clearly communicated when family trips would be for either us or them. Paying them, I feel like, did definitely provide an element of accountability and responsibility for them. So that's something, sometimes if you think, well, I'm giving you all of this, well, you are. They're learning and they're walking away from it, but it feels really good to be paid for that too. And to be paid fairly. So I thought that was really important. I learned the logistics of expectations and then proactively changing our work schedules to accommodate the weather. E was a lot more accustomed to being outdoors, so I could tell that wasn't as stressful on her or her body. Sometimes with B, I thought, you need to make sure you are drinking a lot of water. I really don't want to have to call your parents, and safety is really important here. You need to make sure that you're safe. These were the two projects that they did, and I will say, so B's was over here, E's was over here, and these posters describe their personalities to the T. B is bubbly and overflowing, very detail-oriented. E is cut and dry, she'll do it, but she was also the one with the more innate animal knack. So I love even how their posters described their personalities. And then they had to talk to people as they came of, this is what rotational grazing is, or this is an internal parasite prevention program. So that was really cool. All right, B, when I asked her to kind of reflect on her experience, she loved it. She loved everything. She's bubbly. She had a strong interest in ag from the very beginning. And so this helped solidify for her that that's what she wanted to do. After her second summer, she graduated. She is now pursuing a degree in ag business. And we continue to work with her. The ongoing relationships are really neat. I've written letters of recommendation, scholarship application letters for her. If she's found, she told me where she was going to school. She said they had a goat farm nearby and I applied and things like that. And she'll come visit us on breaks. So that was really neat. Her parents, this is what they said. She said, it has been great watching our daughter gain real life experience in an area she's interested in. I think she has been surprised at the work involved and the reality of working in the elements. She is so excited to come and participate, and we're grateful for your guidance. So that was cool. That was really cool. E had a limited ag background, familiar with horses. She had a strong interest in the outdoors and was curious if agriculture is something she wanted to do. But she decided that goats were not her favorite. She said, I don't like keeping them in the fence. Actually, her family lived close enough that we rented a couple goats to them to try to handle some brush control after we had built some trust through it. And I think that just solidified the deal for her. She said, no, that's not for me. And that's just as valuable, that they could walk away and say, that's what I don't want to do, as that's what I do want to do. So I liked that too. She has continued to pursue other ag interests, and we've got her more connected with horse people in the area. And I think she's doing really, really well. And we still see her around. So yeah. Ultimately, is it worth it? Well, the answer, as with a lot of things, is it depends. So firstly, it's so fulfilling. So fulfilling. Being able to mentor into the lives of others and help them grow and build confidence in things they're interested in. And I saw it as my job as the host of Interns to give them a great experience. So I wanted to help them. And in the end, it benefited me too, right? I invested a lot of time and energy at the beginning to help train them, know what to do, to build trust with them. And then by the end, they could do it. They could do it. When I would talk to people about my interns, I think the overall theme they thought was free labor. You get free labor. And I'm going to tell you, it's not free labor. It takes more work to explain what you're doing and teach why and teach it well than it does just to do it yourself. So you have to go into it going, I know that and I want that because they're growing as a person and that's so well worth it. It did take a lot of emotional and physical labor to invest in the interns, from giving them clear expectations, developing daily plans, organizing field trips, forming intentional education. And I will say for E, for her, I didn't give her a list of webinars to pick from in the same way. Instead, I would say, I think you need to watch this one. I think this one would be really good for you. So by then, even refining some of the things of, not that I want to take all your freedom away, but I observed her enough to see what she was interested in and then just direct her instead of kind of like this shotgun style of let's see what we get. Mistakes could be costly. So I don't know how long this tank ran like that because it was uneven, but if you see my water's coming in and going out. Oops. So things maybe would not be done the way I would do it. You just don't know what you don't know. And I make mistakes too. So being gracious about that. Also having clear expectations and saying, hey, let's learn from this together. The tank should always be level if you're putting an automatic filler on it. But a teachable spirit goes a long way. So taking the time in the application and interview process to get to know somebody, to identify the teachable spirit, even if they have a lot of background that you think that would fit this position, do they have the kind of internal characteristics to make it well worth it for both of you? That's really, really important. You're going to spend a lot of time together. And then the other thing I found is that good interns are involved in a lot of places. So sometimes that made scheduling tricky. If they are reliable and showing up and are going to do what they say they're going to do, they're probably doing that in other school activities. And so that was just something we had to accommodate from the very beginning. And that's why those clear expectations were so, so important. So ultimately, the honest truth of this is that interns are not for every farm. And they're not for every season either. Our family has grown. I've had people ask, are you going to have more interns? Not right now. My kids are my interns. I can't put any more on my plate, and I'm not going to hire an intern unfairly to them. If you are coming to our farm for an internship experience, I want to give you a full experience. And that's really, really important. It's not cheap or easy labor, but they are trainable. And so ultimately, you do reap benefits, but you put a lot in at first. And the whole thing is deeply formative for them and for you. This was a great experience. And I hope in another season of my life to really be able to offer internships like this for students again. That's just, that's going to be on hold for a while. And if engaging youth is something you want to do, there's a lot of ways to do it beyond having an intern. Finding ways to invite them to your farm even for a day. Just youth trips. I get calls all the time of schools looking for field trip opportunities. And, your school, you said what, 8,000 a year? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So people want to learn. They want to see and have that experience. And then, or just mentoring somebody. You find somebody who wants to learn, take them under your wing, feed them a little bit of information here and there, say, hey, I'm planting today. You want to come over? Something like that. So that was my experience with youth interns. If you have any questions about that or later down the road, or if you want me to send you the link to our SARE, the SARE presentation, I will gladly do that. It has all of the pre-tests and post-tests I use. It has a lot of the application questions I use. Like those forms that I made, they are all open source for you to take and adapt and change for your own. Or if you just want to stay in touch with me, that QR code will kind of link you to our farm email, and that comes with just regular updates as well. So do you have any questions? Yeah.
What was one question or other questions that you had on the application that really helped you weed out the interns and who would be good for you?
So I left them largely open-ended. because I wanted to kind of see a little bit of character in there. And so not narrowing the question so much. Like sometimes I would start with tell me about your agricultural experience, or tell me about a time that you worked through something hard. And then sometimes what you get on the application and what you meet in person don't align. And so seeing that too. And then sometimes you think you have a good fit. Like that first year, I thought I had a great fit. And then she was a total no-show. So it doesn't, in that case, I walked away from that really, really thankful. Like if that wasn't a good fit, I'm really glad we knew from the very beginning. Yeah.
Was your husband involved with this?
He tried to stay out of it. No, he works full-time otherwise. So that was pretty well on us. Yeah.
You have an education background.
Yes, but in a total different field, not in teaching and not in youth.
Did they live close by?
One of them lived half an hour away, which I thought was a pretty significant investment of her time. And then one lived probably within a 20-minute drive.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks,
Thanks, guys.
Sarah. It was good.
We've got a break now until 2:00, at which point in this room, there will be waters and watering systems with Herschel. So if you're interested, and then after that, there's another session in this room at 3:15, I think, on virtual fencing and other livestock. So is your educational background in nursing? Is that
Yeah.
like?
Yeah.
You were so intentional. That's really amazing.
But with college students, it was very different.
Yeah, but it's just like this was very thoughtful, I thought. I feel like a lot of people are just like, oh, I want some farm labor or something, you know.
So, where do you live at?
I live on the south end of Miami County.
That's where. I'm from Nevada, Kansas.
Okay, all right.
Colorado.
So Kansas City,
Uh-huh.
drive south
Okay.
about
So
an hour or so.
when you apply for interns, you've got a pretty